after that, we got Lane Kiffin for real.
Kiffin has made the decision to leave Ole Miss to become the next head coach of the LSU Tigers.
We went through
That's
a lot with
fucked
Keith
up.
Carter trying to figure out a way, to make this playoff run work. And yeah, he asked me not to come to the meeting and said I couldn't come, which I totally understand.
I would just say any player that
That's
goes to play
tough.
for Lane Kiffin, just understand one thing. It's not about the program. It's about Lane Kiffin.
Lane
Bro's gonna
Kiffin just
take-
did something that
take
has
a-
never happened before in college football history. A head coach just left his team right before the college football playoff. He didn't wait until after the season. This didn't happen during the offseason. This happened right now with his team about
Bro
to
just
play for a
dipped on him.
national championship for the first time ever. And the craziest part about this is it's not even the messiest exit of his career. You see, Lane Kiffin has a history, the kind of history that includes getting fired at an airport or having students burn mattresses outside of his office and being called a disgrace by an NFL owner who used an overhead projector just to prove his point. And we're going to get to all of that.
No
But first,
way.
you need to understand what just happened over the last 48 hours because this story involves a $98 million contract, a $54 million lawsuit, a governor inserting himself into football decisions, coaches being told to get on a plane or lose their jobs, and a parting shot at the athletic director that's already going viral. So before we get to the content, we are still giving away jerseys to a subscriber that turns on our notifications on this channel. Monday Night Football, 6 packs, every into tonight.
Shout out microphone.
Link right below that's been sponsoring today. On Sunday afternoon, Lane Kiffin posted a statement to X
Oh, yeah, I
announcing
seen
he
this.
was
I
leaving
just
Ole
looked
Miss
at it
to
and I
become
just
the next
kept
head
scrolling.
coach at
I didn't
LSU. Now, coaches changing jobs
Didn't
happens
realize what
all
was
the
going
time.
on.
But Lane Kiffin being Lane Kiffin, he couldn't just announce the move and thank everyone for the memories. No, he had to throw the Ole Miss athletic director Keith Carter under the bus as well. In his statement, Kiffin said he wanted to stay and coach Ole Miss through the playoffs. He wrote that he was hoping to complete a historic 6-season run with this year's team by leading Ole Miss through the playoffs, capitalizing on the team's incredible success and their commitment to finish strong. That sounds reasonable, right? But then he added this: my request to do so was denied by Keith Carter, despite the team also asking him to allow me to keep coaching them so they could better maintain their high level of performance. Unfortunately, that means Friday's Egg Bowl was my last game coaching the Rebels. Did you catch what he just did there? He said that I originally wanted to stay and my players wanted me to stay, but the university forced me out. He's pretty much painting himself as the victim in this whole situation after he
Even
made
though
his
he just
decision.
did.
ESPN's Matt Schick wasn't having it. He tweeted, reminder today that Lane Kiffin is not the victim. Yes, the calendar needs an adjustment and it required an answer from Kiffin at an inopportune time. But nobody forced him to make the decision that he made. That's on him. Decisions have consequences. And that's
Yeah.
really the heart of this whole thing. Nobody pointed a gun to Lane Kiffin's head and said, hey, you better take this job right now.
And why
or
announce
else.
it right now?
Nobody said that you had to take the job right here, right now, right before the playoffs start. He made a choice. He chose the money. He chose LSU, and now he's trying to spin this whole decision
And go
like
back
he
on
is
it.
the victim here. It's almost as if Ole Miss is the bad guy for not letting him coach their team while simultaneously being employed by their rival. But here's what I haven't told you yet. The money LSU is paying Kiffin is absolutely insane. And when you
Oh,
hear the
shit.
numbers, you might understand why he made this decision. But you also need to know what LSU just went through to even be in this position to hire him, because that story involves a fired coach, fired athletic director, a lawsuit, and
Yikes.
$54 million that LSU desperately tried not to pay. Let's talk about the bag first, because this is where your jaw is going to hit the floor.
Let's
LSU
see.
is reportedly paying Lane
Oh.
Kiffin somewhere between $12
7
to
only
$14
years?
million per year
Damn.
on a 7-year deal worth up to $98 million total. That would make him one of the highest paid coaches in college
I would've loved
football
to.
history. For comparison, Kirby
I would've
Smart at
loved to.
Georgia,
Got
the
me
guy
messed
who's
up.
won 2 national championships, makes $13.3 million per year.
Woo.
Kiffin is about to make more than him, and he's
20
never
times.
even made a playoff game as a head coach. But wait, there's more. On top of that massive salary, LSU is also promising Kiffin somewhere between $20 to $25 million annually for NIL and roster procurement. That's money specifically earmarked to go get players through the transfer portal and recruiting. So when you add it all up, we're talking about LSU committing well over $100 million to Lane Kiffin and building his roster over the next 7 years. Now here's where this all gets really insane. Do you remember when I told you that LSU went through something to get here? Well, they literally agreed to pay their last coach $54 million
That's
just
crazy.
go
crazy.
away. And that process was an absolute
54
disaster.
million?
You see, this whole Lane Kiffin situation only exists because LSU made
What
one
the
of the
M?
worst coaching hires in recent memory. Back in 2022, they poached Brian Kelly from Notre Dame
Oh,
and gave him
yeah.
a
I
10-year,
forgot about
$95 million
Damn.
contract. Kelly was supposed to bring championships back to Baton Rouge. He was supposed to restore LSU to glory.
Oh, you guys
Instead,
are
he went
crazy.
34-14, never won the SEC, never made the playoffs,
Same
and the
thing's gonna happen to
program was
Lane Kiffin,
regressing so
watch.
badly that they fired
Lane
him after
Kiffin.
a 49-25 home loss to Texas A&M back in October. The
LSU
Tigers were
stupid.
5-3 at the time, and the fan base had completely turned on him. Now, firing a coach who isn't working out is normal. It happens every year. But what LSU tried to do next is where things went completely
They tried not
off
to
the
pay him.
rails. After firing Kelly, LSU tried to avoid paying his full buyout.
Told you.
They claimed that Kelly was never formally terminated. They argued that their former athletic director, Scott Woodward, who announced the firing, didn't actually have the authority to fire Kelly. So technically, according to LSU, Kelly was never really fired. They were
So what
just
does
trying to
that
find
mean?
a loophole to avoid paying him $54 million.
Dead
Kelly
ass.
wasn't having it. He filed a lawsuit against LSU, and after a legal battle that lasted weeks, LSU finally caved and agreed to pay him the full $54 million buyout. In his contract, Kelly was entitled to 90% of his remaining salary through 2031, paid out in monthly installments. And it gets even
Yikes.
messier. Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry publicly criticized the Kelly buyout, saying, "We are not going to do that again." He even inserted himself into the coaching search, with reports saying that he basically
They did
told
it
the
again.
school that former athletic director Scott
probably one of the
Woodward would have
sponsors.
nothing to do with selecting the next coach. The governor of Louisiana
For
was
sure,
telling
governor
the
is one of their
university who
sponsors.
could and could not make hiring decisions. So let me make sure you understand what went down here. LSU paid Brian Kelly $54 million to leave after he didn't win anything. Then they turned around and committed close to $100 million to Lane
stupid.
Kiffin. That's over $150 million on two coaches in the span of a month. And the governor who
That's
said we're not
crazy.
doing that again, just let them do
That's
exactly
$200
that.
million.
But here's the thing. If you're an Ole
Technically.
Miss fan feeling betrayed by Kiffin right now, I need you to understand something. You were warned, because Lane Kiffin leaving jobs in chaotic, messy, bridge-burning
In
fashion
less
is as
than 5
predictable
years.
as the sun coming up tomorrow morning. And his history is absolutely wild. I want to go through the greatest hits because this man has been firing and leaving jobs in spectacular fashion for about 20 years now. It starts in Oakland back in 2007.
Oh,
Lane
yeah, I
Kiffin
remember that.
became the youngest head coach in NFL history at just 31
At
years old when the
31?
Raiders hired him. He had no head coaching experience at any level. He was just Pete Carroll's offensive coordinator at USC, and Raiders owner Al Davis decided to take a chance on him. Bro, this did not go well. Now, I don't know if you want to directly point the blame finger at Lane Kiffin, or maybe it's the fact
Al
that
Davis.
the Raiders just happened to draft the biggest draft bust in NFL history at the #1 overall pick. Regardless, Kiffin lasted 20 games. He went 5-15,
20.
and after he was
That's it.
fired, Al Davis held what might be the most legendary press conference in NFL history. The man brought out an overhead projector, like
No
the ones
way.
your teacher used in middle school, and used it to display documents and quotes while calling Kiffin a disgrace to the organization and saying, "I think he conned me like he conned all of you people. And if you don't believe me, watch."
He got Mortensen to say that I sent him a letter, which I never did, and a lot of you carried the fact that I sent him a letter. He's got Mortensen. Mortensen comes, rolls. He's a professional. He lies. He's a professional liar.
An overhead projector
Yo,
in
Al Davis is the
2008
GOAT.
to call a 31-year-old head
Mark
coach
Davis
a
is a
con man.
pussy.
You cannot make this
Al
stuff
Davis
up.
would say the same thing too.
But you got to give credit where credit's due. Kiffin landed on his feet. Just a few months later, Tennessee hired him as their head coach. And in his one season there, the Vols went 7-6. They showed promise. They nearly upset Alabama. Kiffin was recruiting well and talking trash to rival coaches. Tennessee fans loved him. What happened next is burned into Tennessee football history. On January 12, 2010,
Leaves.
Kiffin announced he was leaving Tennessee for USC after just one
course.
season. He didn't even make it a full calendar year. The night he left draft was absolute chaos. Students gathered outside the football facility and started burning mattresses and t-shirts with Kiffin's name on them. But here's the really crazy part. Ed Orgeron, who was on Kiffin's staff at Tennessee, started calling Tennessee's incoming freshmen who hadn't even started classes yet. These were kids who had signed with Tennessee and were supposed to start school that week. Coach O was calling them and telling them not to show up because they were all going to USC. One Tennessee player,
No
Chris
way.
Walker, described the situation, and it's absolutely insane. He said, "That's when it got ugly because I was just trying to calm the guys down. When Jawan James put Coach O on the speakerphone, that's when I grabbed it, told O to not call our players anymore, and hung up." The equipment manager, Max Parrott, was outside trying to put out the burning mattresses with a fire extinguisher when a Knoxville fire truck had to come around the corner to help. It was pandemonium. But USC was supposed to be Kiffin's dream job, right? This was supposed to be his destination. And for
Lasted
a while,
2
it
years
looked like it
probably.
might work. Despite dealing with NCAA sanctions from the Reggie Bush era that cost them scholarships and bowl eligibility, Kiffin actually had some success. The man went 10-2 in 2011 with a depleted roster. And then came 2013. The Trojans started 3-1, which wasn't great, but it wasn't a disaster. And then they went to Arizona State and got absolutely destroyed, 62-41. What happened next is the stuff of legend. As the story goes, Lane Kiffin was fired on the airport tarmac after the flight back to Los Angeles. Now, the legend isn't entirely
No
true.
way.
According to USC's head of security, for complete transparency, it was not on the tarmac. It was an office in the terminal, which I guess that's so much better.
Same thing.
He wasn't fired on the actual tarmac. He was fired,
Fired
in
in
the
the
terminal
terminal.
office and then left behind
Alright,
while
y'all.
the team
Fired
bus
in
drove
the
away.
airport.
His briefcase was delivered to his house later by a staffer. A security guard had to drive him home. Kiffin called this
No
the lowest
way.
point of his career, which is kind of saying something when a few years ago you were coaching Jamarcus Russell and the owner of the Raiders had to bring out a projector to explain why you were so trash as a head coach. But Kiffin would even say, "I had a very large ego." Kids who are given too much too early sometimes, you see it in actors all the time. Sometimes you're not ready for all that. I wasn't ready at 31 to be the head coach of the Raiders, 32 at Tennessee, 33 or 34 at USC. I wasn't ready for all that fame and that money. So
Bro just
after
wanted
getting
the
fired
fame.
by Al Davis with an overhead projector, leaving Tennessee while students burned their mattresses, and getting fired at an airport terminal office, surely Kiffin learned his lesson about leaving jobs gracefully, right? Yeah.
Nope.
About that. Now, to be completely fair, I have to tell you what Kiffin was able to achieve at Ole Miss because it was absolutely remarkable. And it's the main reason why LSU is so willing to pay him nearly $100 million.
is crazy to
In
this
6
guy.
seasons with Ole Miss, Kiffin went 55-19. That's the
55
most wins in a
and
6-year
19?
span for Ole Miss since they won 57 games from
Not bad.
1957 to 1962. He led them to 4 10-win seasons, including the first 11-win regular season in program history this year. His teams broke into the national top 10 in at least one poll in each of the last 5 seasons, something that Ole Miss hadn't done since the legendary John Vaught's teams from 1960 to 1964. Kiffin also became known as the Portal King. He completely revolutionized how programs use the transfer portal. He signed 4 straight top 6 transfer portal classes, including the #1 class in 2024. He sent 23 Ole Miss players to the
Paid 'em.
NFL draft, including 8 in 2025, which is the most for the school since the draft was reduced to 7 rounds in 1994. This year's team leads the entire SEC in total offense at
Paid the players to
498
come.
yards per
Come on
game.
now.
Running back Kawan Lacey has 1,279 rushing yards and ranks 2nd in the nation with 20 touchdowns. And they did all this with Trinidad Chambliss, a quarterback who was playing at Division II Ferris State just last year. Kiffin's Ole Miss teams were the only squad in the SEC to rank in the top 5 in both scoring offense and total yards every single year since 2020. His 50 victories since 2021 rank only behind
Damn,
Georgia
that's quick.
and Alabama as the most in the conference during that span. And now, after
Pricey.
building the program to its highest point in 60 years, after getting them to the doorstep of their first ever college football playoff appearance, Lane Kiffin is walking away right before the finish line. Which brings us to the biggest problem of this entire situation.
Get all the perks with a PF Black Card for $1 down and $24.99 a month. Deal ends Friday, December 5th.
Choose to follow your instincts.
Ole Miss is 11-1 right now. They're about to make their first ever college football playoff appearance. This was supposed to be the culmination of everything Kiffin had built over 6 years. The greatest season in program history. And now the guy who built it won't be there to see it through. And here's the thing that makes this even worse for Ole Miss. The College Football Playoff Selection Committee warned this could impact their seeding. Committee Chairman Hunter Yurachek said last week that if Kiffin left before the playoff, it could be considered when doing the final rankings. The committee's official protocol specifically mentions the unavailability of key players and coaches that may have affected a team's performance during the season or likely will affect its postseason performance as a factor they can use when ranking teams. A source close to the committee told CBS Sports that Kiffin leaving would be viewed in a negative light and that they would drop Ole Miss in the seeding. Right now, the Rebels are ranked 7th. If they fall below 8th, they'd have to play on the road in the first round instead of hosting at home. And this isn't just about pride. Last year, home teams went 4-0 in the first round of the playoff with an average margin of victory of 19 points. The Oxford mayor said hosting a playoff game would bring over $50 million in economic impact to the city. So Lane Kiffin's decision to leave right now, today, before the brackets even finalized, could literally cost Ole Miss a home playoff game worth $50 million to their community.
All right,
bye, have a great time.